I just opened my mouth and it came out before I could stop it.
You watched these shows as a kid and felt completely safe. The laugh track, the lessons, the happy endings every single week. But behind those perfectly lit living rooms and those perfectly timed punchlines, something else was going on entirely. We're talking about real addiction, real abuse, real mental breakdowns, and real casting coups that got people fired for having the nerve to speak up. These 10 family-friendly sitcoms had secrets so dark, so carefully buried, that the studios spent decades hoping you'd never find out. Number 10. The Brady Bunch's secret dark home. Life. Everyone knows the Brady Bunch. 6 kids, 2 parents, a housekeeper named Alice, and a house so cheerful it practically glowed through the television screen. From 1969 to 1974, it was the definition of wholesome American family television. Kids all over the country wanted to live in that house. What they didn't know was that the people actually living inside it were dealing with something considerably darker. Let's start with Robert Reed, who played Mike Brady, the family patriarch and the firm moral center of the entire show. On screen, he was dependable, warm, and wise. Off-screen, he was a deeply closeted gay man in an era when being openly gay in Hollywood was essentially career suicide. Reed spent the entire run of the show in a state of quiet psychological torment, caught between who he was and who his job required him to be. He and series creator Sherwood Schwartz clashed constantly, not just over creative direction, but over the suffocating phoniness Reed felt he was being asked to perform every single week. In one famous incident, Reed sent Schwartz a multi-page memo tearing apart the logic of a script, calling it intellectually insulting. Schwartz responded by cutting Reed out of the finale episode entirely. That's how personal it got. Then there's Barry Williams, who played Greg Brady, the eldest son and the golden boy of the bunch. Williams has spoken openly in interviews about developing a crush on Florence Henderson, who played his TV mother Carol Brady. That sentence alone should tell you something about the psychological environment on that set. Henderson was considerably older than Williams, and she's acknowledged that a brief flirtation did occur. The show was presenting the picture-perfect blended family to millions of viewers every week. Behind the cameras, the lines between character and reality were getting genuinely blurry. And then there are the kids. Multiple cast members from the Brady Bunch have gone on record describing a childhood defined by the pressure of performing happiness for a nation, while privately struggling through normal adolescence in an extremely abnormal environment. Maureen McCormick, who played Marsha Brady, later revealed in her memoir that she battled cocaine addiction and deep self-worth issues that she traced directly back to the distorted identity the show had built for her from the age of 12. She was Marsha Brady to the entire country. The real her barely had room to exist at all. The house was always bright. The secrets never made it on screen. Number 9. Full House's hidden addiction, storylines. Full House ran from 1987 to 1995 and made its name as one of the most earnest, most openly emotional family sitcoms in television history. There were hugs, there were lessons. There were life-affirming speeches delivered over swelling music, while the audience sat in complete silence. It was the show that reminded you that families could work things out if they just talked to each other, which makes it particularly dark that the show was quietly orbiting a very real, very serious addiction crisis the entire time it was on the air. The clearest example is Dave Coulier, who played Joey Gladstone, the lovable comedian and roommate. Coulier has spoken candidly in recent years about his struggles with alcohol during the show's run. But the secret that really reshapes how you see the show involves someone whose name was on the call sheet right up until the credits rolled. Bob Saget, who played the devoted widower Danny Tanner, was by multiple accounts a completely different person the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Saget was famous in stand-up circles for material so aggressively filthy and dark that it sat at the absolute opposite end of the spectrum from Danny Tanner's gentle life lessons. That contrast wasn't just a fun, celebrity trivia fact. It was a man living in 2 completely different psychological realities simultaneously 5 days a week for 8 years. But the addiction thread runs deeper than that. Jodie Sweetin, who played middle daughter Stephanie Tanner, has written and spoken extensively about the methamphetamine and alcohol addiction that took over her life in the years immediately following the show's cancellation. She's been direct about how the loss of that identity, the sudden absence of the structure that had defined her entire childhood, left her completely without psychological footing. The show had been her entire world. When it ended, she didn't know who she was without it. Addiction filled that space. And here's the thing that makes all of this genuinely disturbing rather than simply sad. Full House tackled addiction explicitly in its own storylines. Stephanie deals with peer pressure around smoking. DJ develops an unhealthy relationship with food. The show was packaging these issues into teachable moments for children at home, while behind the scenes, the very real version of those issues was building up quietly in the people performing those lessons every week. Number 8. Saved by the Bell's Caffeine Pill. Episode was based on real caste trauma. If you grew up in the early 1990s, you almost certainly remember the caffeine pill episode of Saved by the Bell. Jessie Spano, the high-achieving, overcommitted overachiever, gets hooked on caffeine pills trying to keep up with her schoolwork and her singing group, and eventually has a breakdown in Zach Morris's arms, screaming that she's so excited and she's so scared. It's one of the most parodied moments in sitcom history. People quote it at parties. It became a meme before memes existed. What you probably didn't know was that the episode wasn't some network executive's idea of a teachable moment. It was a distress signal from inside the production itself. Elizabeth Berkley, the actress who played Jessie, has discussed in interviews the enormous psychological pressure she and the other young cast members were under during the show's run. Saved by the Bell was a machine. It ran on incredibly tight schedules. It required the young cast to essentially be always on, and the environment on set was, by multiple accounts, much harder on the actors than the breezy hallways of Bayside High ever suggested. Mark Paul Gosselaar, who played Zach Morris, has spoken candidly about how none of them really had normal childhoods during those years. The show consumed everything. Dustin Diamond, who played Screech, spent years after the show describing what he called a deeply toxic environment on set. A place where certain cast members were treated as stars and others were treated as props. His claims were disputed by co-stars, but they were detailed and consistent. Whatever the full truth was, Diamond's entire post-Saved by the Bell life became a story of a man visibly falling apart, while the show he came from continued to be sold as nostalgia gold. He died in 2021, estranged from virtually everyone he'd worked with, having spent decades failing to escape the shadow of a character that had consumed his identity at 13 years old. The caffeine pill breakdown everyone laughed at pointed towards something the network never intended to acknowledge. Number 7. The Cosby Show's deliberate silencing of real issues. Before we get into this one, let's establish what we're not going to do. The crimes of Bill Cosby are documented, legally adjudicated, and part of the public record. That is not the secret. The secret is something quieter, something that was hiding in plain sight for over a decade, and something that has nothing to do with the man and everything to do with the machine he built around himself. The Cosby Show debuted in 1984, and by almost every measurable standard, it was a phenomenon. It single-handedly rescued NBC from the ratings basement. It ran for 8 seasons. It redefined what a black family could look like on American primetime television. The Huxtable family was wealthy, educated, funny, and warm. Cliff was an OB-GYN. Claire was a lawyer, the kids were sharp, and the house was beautiful. And every episode wrapped up with something that felt like wisdom. Millions of families, black families especially, saw themselves reflected in that living room in a way television had never offered them before. And that reflection was a lie. A carefully designed, deliberately maintained, network-approved lie. Because The Cosby Show made a choice, and it made it on purpose. It chose to never, ever address race in any meaningful way. Not once, across 8 seasons and nearly 200 episodes, did the show seriously engage with what it actually meant to be Black and Reagan-era America. No redlining, no police, no workplace discrimination, no history. The Huxtables existed in a version of America where racism was essentially a background detail that successful people had already moved past. Cosby was explicit about the philosophy. He believed showing black excellence was more powerful than showing black struggle. And on its face, that sounds almost reasonable. Representation matters, aspiration matters, seeing yourself succeeding on screen matters. But what that philosophy produced in practice was a show that white audiences could point to as proof that the system worked. Look at the Huxtables. If they can do it, what's everyone else's excuse? Harvard professor Alvin Poussin served as a consultant on the show, specifically to ensure storylines reflected positive black images. That sounds like a good thing until you look at what it actually filtered out. Anything too raw got softened. Anything too political got removed. Anything that might make a white viewer uncomfortable with their own country got quietly walked back before it reached the screen. Writers on the show have described a room where challenging material was consistently discarded before it ever had a chance. The show's enormous cultural authority, and it had more than almost any other program on television at that point, was used to sell a version of Black America designed to be palatable to the widest possible audience. Comfortable, unthreatening, safe. The families who watched that show and felt seen for the first time deserved more than that. They deserved a show willing to actually tell the truth about the world they were living in. Instead, they got a beautiful house and a laugh track, and a very deliberate silence. Number 6. Family Ties was built around U.S. marriage falling apart. Family Ties ran from 1982 to 1989 and gave America one of the most beloved TV marriages of the entire decade. Stephen and Elise Keaton, played by Michael Gross and Meredith Baxter, were the blueprint for the thoughtful, progressive, emotionally available couple. Former hippies turned suburban parents, raising kids who challenged them, laughed with them, and occasionally drove them completely insane. They disagreed about politics, they disagreed about money, they disagreed about how to handle Alex's relentless capitalism and Mallory's relentless shopping. But they always came back together, every single episode. The marriage was not just a backdrop for the show, it was the entire foundation. Everything the Keaton family stood for rested on the idea that Stephen and Elise worked. Meredith Baxter has since described her years on Family Ties as some of the most painful of her life. And here's the part that matters. That pain had absolutely nothing to do with the job itself. While she was on screen playing the warm, stable, emotionally grounded half of a model marriage, she was privately living inside a real marriage that was doing the opposite of all of those things. Baxter has described that relationship as defined by emotional abuse, controlling behavior, the kind of slow, grinding psychological damage that doesn't leave visible marks and is nearly impossible to explain to people on the outside who have no idea it's happening, which, in her case, included literally the entire viewing public of the United States of America, who tuned in every week and watched her be happy. She could not talk about it. She could not address it. She was under contract to show up and perform contentment 5 days a week for a network that needed its audience to believe in the Keatons. So she showed up. She hit her marks. She delivered the lines. She did the hugs and the knowing looks and the quiet moments of marital solidarity that made viewers feel safe and warm. And then she went home. Baxter has spoken about turning to alcohol during this period as a way of managing the gap between those two realities. The person she was on screen and the person she was off it had almost nothing in common, and holding both of them at the same time, week after week, year after year, required something to take the edge off. She kept it hidden from producers. She kept it hidden from co-stars. The show never knew. Or, if it knew, it didn't ask. She came out as gay in 2009, more than 2 decades after Family Ties ended, and reflected in interviews on how much of her adult life had been spent performing versions of herself that bore no relationship to who she actually was. The devoted liberal wife, the contented mother, the woman who had it all figured out. None of it was her. 7 seasons, 176 episodes. A marriage that the whole country believed in. She was performing a life she wasn't living. And the cameras never once caught it. Number 5. Growing Pains. Kirk. Cameron was rewriting scripts and getting co-stars fired. Growing Pains was the quintessential late 1980s family sitcom. The Seaver family of Huntington, Long Island gave America a psychiatrist dad, a career mom, 3 kids with varying levels of chaos, and eventually a very famous street kid played by a then unknown Leonardo DiCaprio. It ran from 1985 to 1992, and was consistently one of the most watched shows on American television. And then Kirk Cameron found God, and everything changed. Cameron, who played eldest son Mike Seaver, became a born-again Christian in 1987, at the height of the show's popularity. In itself, that's his business. What made it everyone else's business was what happened next. Cameron began using his position as the show's biggest star to exert control over the content in ways that producers and co-stars found increasingly difficult to work around. He objected to storylines he considered morally questionable. He pushed for rewrites that reflected his religious values. He requested that certain content be removed or altered before he would agree to film it. And then there was Julie McCullough. McCullough had been cast as Mike Seaver's girlfriend Carol, a recurring role that gave the show a strong young female character and a believable romantic dynamic. Cameron reportedly had McCullough removed from the show because she had posed for Playboy before being cast. He objected to her past on moral grounds, and the producers, unwilling to lose their star, went along with it. McCullough was quietly written out. She found out the real reason years later and has spoken about the damage it did to her career and her confidence at a critical point in her professional life. The cast deteriorated. Tracy Gold, who played sister Carol Seaver, was quietly battling anorexia throughout the later seasons, a fact the show did nothing to address and that producers were reportedly aware of. Gold eventually collapsed and had to leave the show to seek treatment. Growing Pains kept going, kept presenting its warm family image, and never once acknowledged that its own house was burning. Number 4. Happy Days' dark origin. Nobody talks about. Happy Days ran from 1974 to 1984 and was, in the most literal sense possible, a machine built to make you feel good about a version of America that never actually existed. Set in Milwaukee in the 1950s, it gave the country exactly what the country wanted in the post-Vietnam, post-Watergate, post-everything exhaustion of the mid-1970s. A simpler time, a cleaner time, a time when the biggest problem a teenager faced was whether to ask a girl to the school dance or the sock hop. Richie Cunningham was kind and decent and uncomplicated. The Fonz was cool in a way that required no explanation. Arnold's Drive-In was always open. Everything was fine. It was escapism so deliberate, it practically came with a prescription. What almost nobody talks about is what the show was before the network got hold of it. The original pilot aired in 1972 as part of the anthology series Love, American Style. And the world Gary Marshall was building in that early version was not a paradise. It was something considerably more honest and considerably more uncomfortable. It was a portrait of mid-century American repression. A world where everything looked fine on the surface because the surface was the only thing anyone was permitted to show. The tensions underneath, the conformity, the suffocating social pressure to perform normalcy were present in that original conception in a way that gave the material actual weight. Then ABC picked it up as a series, and the edges got sanded down, the complications got removed, the discomfort got replaced with a laugh track and a leather jacket. What had started as something with a point of view became something designed purely to comfort. The show ran for 11 seasons, which is an extraordinarily long time to sustain any fictional world, and by the back half of that run, it had become a kind of parody of itself. Which brings us to 1977 and the moment that became so famous it permanently entered the English language. Fonzie, on water skis, in his leather jacket, jumping over a shark. The scene was absurd on its face, and everybody knew it at the time. The phrase jumping the shark, meaning the precise moment a television show runs out of genuine ideas and starts cannibalizing its own image for content, was coined directly from that episode and has been used to describe creative collapse ever since. Happy Days didn't just experience that phenomenon, it invented the vocabulary for it. But the story that deserves more attention than the shark is what the show cost Ron Howard. Howard played Richie Cunningham from the very beginning and eventually made the decision to leave and pursue a career as a director. The network fought it. The industry resisted because the industry did not see Ron Howard the filmmaker. It saw Richie Cunningham. That character, that wholesome, freckled, endlessly decent teenager, had attached itself to Howard's identity so completely that spending the early years of his directing career was largely an exercise in convincing powerful people to look past it. He has described feeling trapped, not unhappy exactly, not ungrateful, but trapped. Happy Days was a comfortable place to be. It was also a cage with very nice furniture, and the door only opened from the outside. Number 3. Different Strokes cast? Was living the trauma the show pretended to warn against? Different Strokes might be the single most tragic story in sitcom history. And that's a category with some genuinely stiff competition. The show ran from 1978 to 1986 and became famous for its very special episodes. Installments where the cast tackles serious issues like drug abuse, sexual predators, and eating disorders in an attempt to educate its young audience. The show was so committed to warning children about the dangers of the world that it practically ran public service announcements as plot points. The cast was living those dangers in real time. Gary Coleman, who played Arnold Jackson and whose catchphrase, "What you talkin' 'bout, Willis?" became one of the most quoted lines in television history, spent his entire adult life entangled in financial and legal chaos that began during the show's run. Coleman's parents and manager had been given control of his earnings under a legal arrangement that Coleman later pursued in court. He sued his parents, won a settlement, and spent the rest of his life in financial difficulty, despite having been one of the most recognizable child stars in the world. He died in 2010 at the age of 42. Todd Bridges, who played Willis Jackson, has written a memoir and given numerous interviews about his descent into drug addiction and criminal activity in the years following the show. He was arrested for attempted murder in 1989, charges from which he was eventually acquitted, but the years surrounding that arrest represent a complete freefall that Bridges has connected directly to the psychological damage of his childhood in that industry. Dana Plato, who played Kimberly Drummond, had her contract reduced after becoming pregnant, effectively reducing her role and cutting off the income she depended on. She struggled with substance abuse for years, committed a robbery in 1991, and died of a prescription drug overdose in 1999 at the age of 34. Her son, Tyler Lambert, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound exactly one day after the 10-year anniversary of her death. Every special episode about how the world could destroy a child, every one of them, and the children performing those lessons were already being destroyed. Number 2, Roseanne's writer's room was a psychological war zone. Roseanne ran from 1988 to 1997 and is legitimately one of the most important sitcoms ever made. It showed working-class America on primetime television at a time when most sitcoms were still presenting upper-middle-class households as the default American experience. It was funny, it was honest, and it was anchored by one of the most commanding performances in the history of the medium. Roseanne Barr didn't just star in the show, she was the show, and that, according to virtually everyone who worked there, is what made the writer's room one of the most hostile environments in Hollywood history. Roseanne Barr has acknowledged in various forms over the years that she was, to put it mildly, a difficult boss. What the writers who worked on the show have described goes considerably further than that. Multiple showrunners were hired and fired. Head writers came and went. The turnover was extraordinary even by television standards. Writers described a room where Barr could and would veto anything, contradict any creative decision, and change course without notice or explanation. People quit. People were fired in humiliating circumstances. One showrunner reportedly lasted less than a week. Jeff Harris and Bernie Kukoff, two of the earliest writers on the show, have spoken about the chaos of working in that environment. Matt Williams, who created the show's format and developed the pilot, eventually left and pursued legal action over credit disputes. The list of writers, producers, and creative personnel who came through that show and left in some state of conflict with Barr is so long it became its own Hollywood story. And the genuinely dark part is that none of this stopped the show from being brilliant. The tension, the volatility, the refusal to compromise, those same qualities that made the writer's room a war zone were also what made Roseanne the most authentic working-class sitcom America had ever seen. The chaos was the source code. The psychological damage to everyone inside it was the price of the output. The families at home watching Roseanne and feeling finally represented on television had no idea what it cost to put this half hour together every week. Number 1. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's most emotional scene was never supposed to happen. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ran from 1990 to 1996 and made Will Smith a global superstar. It was a fish-out-of-water comedy, a culture clash sitcom, a showcase for Smith's enormous charm and comedic timing. It had theme songs people still quote, storylines people still remember, and a cast chemistry that felt effortless in the best possible way. It was also, by Smith's own account, where one of the most genuinely raw and emotionally honest moments in sitcom history was captured almost entirely by accident. The scene is in the season 4 episode where Will's father Lou, played by Ben Vereen, comes back into his life and then abandons him again. Lou shows up full of charm and promises, spends time with Will, rebuilds the connection, and then bails when an opportunity comes up that's more important to him than his son. Will delivers a monologue in which he lists everything he accomplished without his father, everything he learned to do alone, and then completely breaks, asking why he isn't good enough to make his father stay. He asks it to his uncle Philip, played by James Avery, who pulls him into a hug while Will cries. That scene was not planned as an emotional breakdown. Smith and the writers knew it was a heavy moment, but the rawness of what ended up on camera was not scripted. Smith has described in interviews how something happened during that take, something connected to his own experience, his own feelings about absent fathers, his own life that he did not fully anticipate. The tears were real. The question was real. The crew went silent. Nobody called cut. James Avery, who died in 2013, was by all accounts one of the most grounding presences on that set, a trained actor who brought genuine gravitas to a role that could have easily been played for laughs. His quiet response in that scene, the way he simply holds Will without saying anything, was instinct. It was what the moment required and what Avery knew how to give. Fresh Prince kept the take. They aired it. Audiences watched Will Smith ask why he wasn't enough, and an enormous number of them recognized something in that question that they had never expected a sitcom to speak directly to. The laugh track was absent. The lesson wasn't tidy. Nothing was resolved in 22 minutes. It was the most honest thing that show ever did, and it was never supposed to happen at all. Here's what ties all of these together. Every single one of these shows gave you a version of family life, of growing up, of how people treat each other, that was carefully constructed, carefully maintained, and carefully protected from the reality of what was actually happening inside it. The networks needed you to believe in the fiction. The advertisers needed you comfortable. The laugh tracks needed to keep rolling. But people are not laugh tracks. People break, they struggle, they grieve. They fight for their identities against machines that need them to stay a certain shape. The actors in these shows were people first and products second. Even when the industry treated it the other way around, the shows were great. Some of them were genuinely among the best television ever made, and they were built on top of something complicated and sometimes very dark, the way most great things are.